Chapter 16. It turns out that a veil across your memories is only so much good once you know the shape of what you were forgetting. When I was just Nicky, a girl who didn't even know what her name was short for. The memory stayed hidden. Now that I knew I was Nicola, though, when I was awake, I could turn my thoughts away, but sleep has a way of showing us the things we're afraid of. I saw jail cells, and my own wrist in manacles, and I knew the absolute terror of being powerless. I saw fire and heard screams, and I wanted to look away, but these were memories. And I had looked then, and I had to look now. I saw people die, people I loved, and I knew the absolute fury of being unable to help them. I saw Philip, too, handsome and laughing, and I felt a flush of remembered desire when he stood by my side. I could sense myself trying to move, but I hadn't moved then and I couldn't move now. I couldn't hear the words he whispered in my ear anymore, but I remembered the satisfaction. The sense that everything was coming together. It was a dark satisfaction. It was revenge, and I was lost in it, trying to beat my way out of the dream before the satisfaction seeped into my bones. And I began to crave it once more. At least I had enough sense to be scared of it. I woke to weak sunlight and Damon shaking me, and now that I could move, I yanked myself away from him out of instinct. It took a few panicked moments to realize where I was, and that he wasn't Philip. My shirt was soaked with sweat, and I brought my knees up to rest my head on them. "Bad dream?" he asked me finally. "Yeah, close enough." I wiped a sweat-soaked curl of black hair off my brow and pulled my ponytail out to make a new one. I'd kill for a bath. And a whole new life, really. "Well, we have to get moving." Damon looked around himself instinctively. As if the forest had ears. I'm not the only hunter who's a druid. The forest will only keep us safe for so long. So it isn't really real. I wondered. I looked around at the hastily shrinking moss bed that had sprung up beneath me while I slept. He was distracted by that. His mouth quirked. "What's real?" he asked. "You're here, aren't you? I mean, part of the real world." "Which one is the real world?" I gave him a look. "The other one. Just because you can't always see this one doesn't mean it isn't part of the real world." His amusement was palpable. And he shook his head as he laughed silently to himself. "What?" It came out harsher than I'd intended. "It's just sorcerers are very. They only tend to believe what they can see and feel on their own." He shrugged. "How else are you supposed to live? Listen for the things you haven't noticed before." He lifted a shoulder. "Remember, I wasn't born with this. I had to learn to see these places." As much as it irked me to hear him talk down about me and my pragmatism. The conversation had distracted me enough to relax a bit. My heart rate was back down in a normal range, and, like a true dream, the images were fading enough that I could pretend they weren't real. In a few more hours, I figured, I'd probably be able to convince myself of that. What I'd do the next time I had to sleep, I wasn't quite sure. "Look, this is..." Damon blew out a breath. He was pacing, shoulders tight. "What?" I reached out to take a skewer of meat. He'd clearly been out hunting before I woke up. And blew on it to cool it. "Do you have any allies we could take shelter with?" He crouched down next to the fire and stared determinedly at the flames instead of me. I stared blankly at him. "Are you crazy?" "No." He did look at me then. "I don't know what to do. We're being hunted, that much I know. Tarek's not likely to forgive this, and if he came out on top of that fight with Julius, you know he won't have told anyone the truth about what happened." "Philip," I murmured. "What?" "Not Julius. Philip." "Well, who is that?" He shook his head. "I'm not sure." I lifted my shoulders helplessly. "Which makes it pretty irrelevant, I guess. He was one of my allies back in the day. That's all I know." This gave me ammunition, however, and that's the sort of person my allies were, so you see why it would be a bad idea to get involved with them again. Aren't they the ones trying to restart the whole Black Death thing? "Yeah, which you might be able to talk them out of doing." I froze mid-bite. That was a good point. It was also a terrifying point, and a moment later, my scared mind came up with a reason why. I swallowed a bite of food I hadn't really tasted. "I don't think it's a good idea. I don't remember much about them, and I don't have any power. It would be too easy for us to get in over our heads." I realized a second later that I'd assumed he was in this with me, and stumbled over my words trying to fix it. "Not that you're necessarily. Well, I mean, it would be even easier for me to get in over my head alone. And I'm pretty well known," Damon said wryly. "It'll be enough of a chore to try to convince them that you've come back on their side, without trying to convince them that I've changed my stripes." I gave him a wry look. It should have come off as a humble brag, those words, but I remembered the fact that Sarah had recognized him without ever having met him. "Why are you so well known?" To my surprise, he didn't answer at once. He seemed almost nervous. "I'm one of the only druids who joined the Academ," he said finally. "I'm a good hunter. I'm very good. I can find most people. Right at the start, I didn't track down many new sorcerers. I tracked down your old allies. Nicola's old allies. The correction was awkward, too much of a distinction. I've trained a few other druids to be hunters, but most druids prefer to stay out of everything. After the assembly, and after Nicola, they didn't want anything to do with the sorcerers. Tarek didn't care as long as they didn't interfere, but it was a fine line. I felt like I had to be the best at what I was to earn his goodwill for the rest of the druids. He closed his eyes. I wish I hadn't. So Damon Braddock was the scourge of the monarchists, an enemy with powers they didn't know how to fight. A man they knew as someone who came and killed without mercy. The fact that we might be on a slightly more even moral footing than I'd previously thought was less comforting than I expected it to be. Okay, so they hate you. There wasn't really a need to say anything more. And you know Tarek better than I do, I guess, so I'll take your word for it that he's on a warpath. So where the hell do we go from here? Somewhere we can undo the block on your magic, Damon said bluntly. And your memories. And I can't do either of those things, so we have to make a choice between the separatists or the... No, I cut him off. No way. I can't think of anyone else we've got. He talked to me like I was a child. The druids can't help you. They could hide you, but they probably wouldn't, between Tarek not liking that and who you are. No, I mean, I'm not unblocking my magic. Oh, for fuck's sake. He looked over at me. You need your magic. No, I don't, and neither does the world. How's everything been since I went away? No more magical plagues. Sure, just naturally occurring ones, a few major wars, some nukes. Genocide. He crossed his arms. You think you were the only evil in the whole world. I was certainly someone the world didn't need. And now you're someone the world does need, Damon shot back. Why? Why does it need me? Can't someone else deal with Tarek? And if Tarek didn't win, Philip, training me, letting it be known that I'm back, is only going to make the monarchists bolder. There are going to be people who want me back, who want to use my powers for that plan. I'm not going to let that happen. Then don't let it happen. Damon waved his hands. It's not that easy. What? Your power just runs away from you. I don't know. I pounded my fist on the ground in frustration. Don't you see, I don't have the first clue what turned me into a psychopath in the first place. Maybe it was my magic. Maybe it's something buried deep down in those memories. Who the hell knows what will set loose if we undo those spells? He said nothing. He was staring at me with a funny look on his face. Don't you get it? I whispered. The world's better off without Nicola Beaumont. I don't want to be Nicola Beaumont. I don't want to be trained again. I don't want to remember her life. And if it means I have to give up my power and my memories, that's such a small price. Maybe I'm still alive, but she's dead, and I want it to stay that way. Through a blur of tears, I thought I saw Damon's face soften. He came to pull me up. Esh, he said quietly. What? I wiped at my eyes. I didn't know an awful lot about myself, but I hated crying in front of him. We should go find her. You mentioned training. Well, she trained you, once. My head jerked up, and I opened my mouth to argue. And then, Damon said patiently, she refused to join any of the 3 factions and has been living in isolation since. Doing God knows what. But she's well over 5,000 years old if the myths are correct. She never agreed with what you did way back when. And she didn't think much of Tarek. If anyone can help us, it's her. My shoulders slumped. Just take me back, I said quietly. It'll be easier then. Esh will know what to do, Damon said seriously. Nicky, what's been done to you is breaking down. You know who you are now. The veils won't hold forever. Maggie's block won't hold forever. If you're afraid of what's going to happen when your power gets unleashed, we need someone who knows more about magic than either of us. And who isn't in Tarek's pocket. Or a monarchist. That's Esh. And you're sure she wasn't part of my plan before? I asked suspiciously. Very sure, Damon said confidently. She wrote some scathing letters about it. They're in the academ libraries. I'll show you someday. Well, if there's still an academ to go back to at the end of this. His voice was tight. If Philip did kill Tarek, I began. I paused, not sure how to go on. The Coimil are some of the most powerful sorcerers in the world, Damon said bluntly. They'll protect the students. I'm next to useless there, but I'm not here. I can help here. So let's go. He set off without waiting for a response. Where are we going? I called after him. Damon. There was no answer, and finally I decided to follow him, muttering about stubborn druids who thought they knew everything. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a tiny spark of hope kindled in my chest now. Esh was over 5,000 years old, and had trained me, and might well know more about magic than anyone alive. As well as knowing about my magic. Esh might be able to do what everyone else claimed couldn't be done. Esh might be able to cure me of what made me, me.